Brad Sham every Monday at this time on the Diamond Factory Hotline. Brad, the number one reason in your mind that the Cowboys lost that game?
2 interceptions. It's easy to say the run defense.
Right.
But the Packers got 14 points on 2 3-play drives. So, I mean, they're tied. Obviously, you can't give up 200 yards rushing. It's atrocious. So that's got to be fixed. But the 2 interceptions are drives that come up empty. So one was in the end zone. I mean, you're giving up points, and then they turn them into points, and you wind up tied in regulation. So I'll even take my chances with the horrible run defense in that game if I can have the 2 interceptions back. But you can't play run defense like that.
What did you and Babe think happened with the 2 interceptions? A lot of debate. Should Lamb have squared off his route more? Why were Lamb and Schultz so close together on the first one? The miscommunication that seemed to be there. What did you and Babe see?
Well, the one in the end zone with Schultz, I mean, I was in the interview room after the game when Dak said that Schultz said he got bumped off his route, and then he did say that there was miscommunication twice with Lamb, and that stuff happens so fast. And the replays, by the way, vary from stadium to stadium. So the ones we were getting last night were slower than usual. So we didn't even have time to really study those because you're on to the next play. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, I think that on one of them, certainly the route could have been squared off more. And on the one, you can't have 2 receivers that close together in the end zone. That's not how it's designed. So somebody did something wrong.
Your overall assessment of Dak's game?
Not good. I mean, which is kind of hard to say when Lamb had a career. That's one of the shames of the thing. You wasted a career day from Lamb and a career day from Pollard. But, I mean, there was no rhythm. I cannot begin to explain to you why he was so off the first couple times. I mean, his first or second possession, he just didn't look like he knew where he was throwing it. Or it was getting away from him, and it was high and sailing, and then there were some other times when he really settled in and really made some very nice throws. So you can't say it was horrible, but you certainly can't say it was good. And I thought it was just uneven all night long. They never really settled into a rhythm.
Are we being a little bit too hard on an offense that put up almost 30?
That's a fair question, RJ, and I asked myself that on the bus afterward, replaying it, and a little bit on the plane. I mean, okay, you scored 28 points, and that has to be enough. Mm-hmm. That really ought to be enough. And so that would lead me to say then the answer to Sean's opening question would be the run defense. I mean, you can't have. By the way, I dispute with absolutely no grounds the statistic that was tweeted out that they had never ever lost a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. I dispute that. I think it's wrong. I think I remember times when they have, but it doesn't matter. You can't lose that game if you're a good team, when you have that kind of a lead. You can't do it. So that's a fair question. What else do you want the offense to do? And that's why I come down to I want the offense to not turn the ball over.
Brad Sham here on The Fan. If I told you on Friday this was going to be the Christian Watson game, you would have said what?
I would not have been surprised. I said several times during the game last night, this quarterback created Lazard. Yep. He created Valdez-Scantling. I mean, Watson had a great career for a championship program at North Dakota State. He's got multiple championship rings. And they drafted him in the second round. And so I thought he was doing it with a guy who barely played, if he did last night, Toure, number 83. And they were doing it with Dobbs before he got hurt. He has this way of elevating everybody's game around one receiver who has a skill set. Now, the difference between what he's doing now and what he's done in the past is he always had a lead dog. He had a Devontae Adams. He had a Jordy Nelson. He always had some star, and he doesn't have that this time. You could say Sammy Watkins, but it's not Sammy Watkins. And so I would have said, yeah, okay, that makes no and perfect sense to me if you told me that on Friday, because that's what he's done before.
What did you think about McCarthy's decision to go for it instead of the Maher 53-yarder?
Geez, there were so many of those times. We're talking about in overtime?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was fine with that. The ball was not traveling, especially at that end of the field. When Maher kicked off that way, the ball was hanging. I don't think Maher leads the league in touchbacks. I don't think he had a single touchback going in that direction. And there wasn't a lot of wind, but the ball was just happens this time of year, happens in cold weather, and it was in the low 30s at that point. It was just hanging up. I don't know that you would have made that, and if you missed it, you would actually be giving the ball up 8 yards further upfield from where they did. So I was okay with that.
Some portion of the fan base is blaming the officiating. Your thoughts on Jalen Tolbert offsides, the McGovern hold, and Jair Alexander on CeeDee Lamb?
Officiating is almost never the reason that you lose. And those are probably all reasonable objections. I know I saw one long run of theirs, because I did get a chance to see a replay, that set up one of their touchdowns where DeMarcus Lawrence got held so much worse than anything McGovern thought about doing on his hold that it was objectionable. But that's part of the game. Those things happen, and you just have to play at a level above what the officials can do to take you out of it. The officials, all of those are legitimate objections. The officials didn't have anything to do with 2 interceptions. And the officials didn't have anything to do with passes thrown high or the lack of rhythm in the passing game. You have to overcome those because they're going to happen to both teams, and they probably did if we're fair and go back and look at the whole tape. And those are all legit. The timing was bad. Tolbert, I heard it expressed that he thought that she'd told him to go up closer to the line, move yourself up. So I'm sure he's confused, but that stuff happens. You have to overcome those. You have to play at a level above them.
So wait, did the official? Do we know that what the official said? She did say.
I don't know what. I know that it was that some of his teammates said in the locker room that she told him, "You got to get closer to the line."
Brad, I think that the Achilles heel that could ultimately do them in is the run defense. Are the pieces on the roster to fix it?
I think they are, and by fix, they're not going to give up 50 yards a game. That's not going to happen. But I think they are absolutely there to play better and have the offense play better at the same time. And by fix it, we mean able to win in spite of not being as good in that department as you would like. It's going to take some work. Dalvin Cook will get the ball Sunday. Don't worry about it. And then Saquon Barkley will. And then, all these teams will watch the tape, and then it's up to them now to some of this stuff, and I have a feeling, Sean, that most of what we're seeing with the kinds of runs that are beating them are not so much a question of being overpowered at the line of scrimmage. Their technique and their what coaches call run fits, where you play on a certain look and stay in your lane and do your job. and don't try to chase the ball. Most of these things are fixable to a degree that you can win. But you can't give up 200 yards a game. That's just not going to do it.
A lot of Cowboy fans were tweeting and saying this morning, this is just who and what they are. The Dallas Cowboys are allergic to prosperity. To that, you say what?
Crap.
Do you have a player show tonight?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it seemed like a good time to bring Cooper Rush back.
Oh, why would you do?
Oh no!
You want to start a fire in the cold? Is that why? What are you doing?
Well, what do you think that I did it on the plane last night? Let's see if we can get Cooper Rush. We've had it set up for 2 weeks.
He was trending yesterday. Of course, Sean Payton was trending yesterday.
You know what? This every time you say to me, the fan base says, just a little part of me just crinkles and tightens. I mean, the fan base doesn't know what it's looking at or talking about.
Well.
And I understand everybody's upset because they lost the game. Nobody was upset when they were 6-2. Okay? Nobody was upset to this extent after they beat the Bears or beat Detroit, and so now they lost the game. Well, you lose games. If I told you before the year, they're going to be 12-5 again. Most of this super educated fan base would have said, "Oh, I don't think they're good enough for 12-5." Well, they could still be 12-5. I don't know what they'll be. I'm not saying they will be, but so far, I think they've lost 3. They're 6-3, and there's half a season. There's half a season to play. Just to quote the great Aaron Rodgers, just relax. Let them do their jobs and see if they can figure it out. Don't be telling me, all you expert coaches with Twitter accounts, as long as Elon lets you have one.
Hey, are you paying for the blue check mark or what?
No, please.
Thank you, Brad.
See you, boys. Have a good week.
Brad Sham on fire here on 105.3 The Fan.
On the one hand, he caught 11 passes on 15 targets for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's a career high for catches, career high for receiving yards, and tie for a career high in most touchdowns. But on the other side, don't feel like this is the first time CeeDee Lamb has decided not to cut in front of safeties and potentially cost them a turnover.
The same route concept that interception happened in the Bears game. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The exact same throw. So, yeah, that has happened, and I don't know exactly. If I'm Kellen Moore, why would I ever put that in my playbook again? I'd just be like, well, we just won't run this one anymore. We'll run the things that y'all are good at. Don't ask guys to do stuff that they can't do, I guess, is kind of the deal
Right.
here. But you're saying, Kevin, that you can't just be thankful for the great game that he had, that you have to go after him for the 4 non-catches rather than all the great stuff that he did.
I would dispute go after him, first of all. And secondly, if that is how you want to quantify it, sure, because he's also part of the reason we lost the game then.
Because of the pass interference that wasn't called?
No, I meant more because of the interception. There are lots of reasons
2 interceptions.
the Cowboys lost. Are you putting both of those
He was
on him?
involved in both plays.
Okay.
He seemed to blame Dalton Schultz on the other.
He absolutely did.
And
It
could have been.
Was
like,
that
I mean,
it? Was that? I mean, I wonder.
if that guy's moving slow, you do have to wait for him before you can make your move.
I always wonder in situations like that before we get to see the all 22 if it's like a soccer goalie conundrum where you're like, well, of course it wasn't my fault. And you start pointing at other people. So maybe he's guilty for one of them. Maybe it's both of them. Maybe it's 1.5.
He's involved in both of them.
Okay, but
I'm going to put it there.
He was involved in both of them. And that's why I'm not trying to go after him. I'm just saying if we're setting the standard for his capability of being a number 1 wide receiver, because you know what's going to happen after this year's up. They're going to be like, oh, now he's eligible for a contract extension. And you're going to have to figure out like what you would want that number to look like. And
0.
Oh, come on.
If you've signed Odell Beckham Jr. for the next 3 years, then yeah, I can go ahead and draft the future, and we'll wait till Jalen Tolbert turns into a star.
I don't think
So you're just, I mean, are you being sarcastic?
That was sarcasm.
Okay,
by
thank
Tolbert.
you.
I thought.
No. Oh, wait, are you being sarcastic about
Odell Beckham?
No, this is a reality.
And are you
this is a
being
real thing that I
sarcastic
think.
about CeeDee Lamb?
This is a real thing that I think. I think the Cowboys have decided that CeeDee is not an alpha number one wide receiver. That he is a good wide receiver, but not the alpha in the room that they need. Okay. And they've decided we have to come up with another plan. I think this is a logical plan that could happen if you decide Michael Gallup's been paid. We'll pay Odell for 3 years. We don't have to pay CeeDee Lamb for a 5-year deal that's worth upwards of $20 million or whatever. And we can take that time to draft and develop another one for when Odell's done.
Can you tell me just a little bit more about why you would give Odell the 3-year deal coming off back-to-back injuries?
So you have a receiver for the future there.
Okay.
You have the security of not having to re-sign CeeDee Lamb for how much more do you think Odell would make than CeeDee, or do you not think that?
I mean, I think CeeDee should make more, but when you hear, and by the way, I
think CeeDee Lamb will get, if you let him go to the open market, I think he's $25 million a year on a 5-year deal. I think he's 5 for 125. You mentioned Chicago
I would
that
be
has
shocked
110
by
million.
that. I think it's more in the 20 range, but then again,
all it takes is one team that has that much money.
Absolutely.
And
that's true.
I mean, just looking at Jacksonville or Chicago, let's just say, and he's not a free agent for 2 more years.
Exactly.
Like you have him next year, you can franchise tag him for 1 year with it still being a somewhat low number,
right.
but then you get 2 teams and it might be past Chicago and Jacksonville's time, but let's just say whoever takes the top 3 quarterbacks, the Carolina Panthers, for example, or Houston Texans, and they're like, dude, we don't have a number 1 and we can only take 1 first-round pick. Let's take an offensive lineman. They're sitting there. Let's just give CeeDee Lamb 5 years, $125 million. Hell, we still have another $75 million to spend anyways.
Now,
Right.
I also want to point out that's what I feel that they have decided. I also can see where Steven and Will have said, let's wait until all the results are in before we make that decision to have that discussion with him on his future contract. Kevin, I've seen some things from him this season that I've been very happy with. I've seen some other things that we've been debating of whether or not he's this kind of guy, and it hasn't completely been corrected. Where you're like, man, catch 100% of the balls. I know it's stupid.
Sure.
But 50 is not a good number. And so I want more of that still when it comes to watching him. Seeing what he did yesterday was a promising thing. Can we do it again? And can we do it consistently? And can you do it against double teams? And can you, whenever it's time for you to be the guy, are you the guy? I mean, we saw Justin Jefferson was yesterday, and he continues to be. So I got to see that more from him.
Now, this is what I'm going to throw out. This is his predictive stat line based on what he's done so far. By the way, an interesting question, and I guess sometimes maybe we take it for granted. People were asking, and I saw, Reggie, that you just responded, but people might think about this a lot. The all-22 is essentially, it's the full field view,
the coach's film
of everything that's happening. And so they do make that accessible. And so a lot of people, whenever they say I have to go back and watch the film, that is our version of have to go back and watch the film when you're assigning like blame for some of these things.
On NFL Plus is I guess what they named it. It was
That's
Game
right.
Pass or whatever for a while. You had the shortened version, the full game, and the coach's film. And the coach's film shows you 2 different angles of all 22 players on the field. Like, it does have that focus on one angle from, I think it's in front of the offensive line or behind it, and then a side angle that sees both on you can see the safeties and corners and everything.
So CeeDee Lamb is in line for 100 catches with 1,333 yards and 9 touchdowns.
Quality, man.
Are the expectations of what a number 1 wide receiver should be skewed because of your Cups, Jeffersons, etc., or are you like, no, that's really good, but I still need it to be better?
Yes.
I want it to be better. I'm throwing this out as a question. What's the difference in year 3 from CeeDee Lamb and Des Bryant? Didn't Des make these mistakes too?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But also have good numbers. Now, I know that CeeDee's not consistently putting up numbers on a weekly basis. At times, I feel like we had the same conversation about Des.
Let me ask you a question then. I know CeeDee Lamb had a great statistical game yesterday, but do you ever get the perception that like he frequently takes over games when it felt like there were games where you're like, what are you going to do? You can't stop Des right now. And he just like took over. Do you think it's a perception problem among people more than a numbers problem?
I do think for the first time yesterday, you could say CeeDee took over the game. And Dez, I would have to try to go, but it's tough because, yes, Dez took over plenty of games in his prime. I just don't know when Dez hit that prime where you felt like about one every 4 games, a quarter of the games Dez took over in his prime during a season.
Yeah.
And that was game 1. Would you say that's the first game where CeeDee's taken over this year? Where you're like, dude,
yes,
that was.
Yes, I would.
I know the 2 plays, you have to count those 2 plays.
And
I will count the Giants game whenever he dropped the ball and then decided, okay, I'm actually going to catch him in the second half.
And that's a weird dynamic then, because if those are your 2 games, you're like, these are the 2 games where CeeDee Lamb took over. Also, these are 2 games where there are things that happen in that game that are infuriating, and some people would say unacceptable for a number 1. But I'm just asking, is that like bar too high? He's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Cooper Kupp. All right, conceded. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Is there not an area where he can live as the number 1 wide receiver?
Does that make him a number 2?
Well, no, I feel like you don't want to go as far as this, is that he's the 33rd best receiver in the NFL, because that would be a premium number 2, right?
Yeah.
Because there's 32, what you'd say number 1s, but there really aren't. But I do think as this season's progressed, he's pushing to be a top 10 receiver in the NFL. To your point, no, he is not. You start naming 5 or 6 guys, and he's not close to those guys. But once you get to about number 10 or 11, I think you have to start going, well, is CeeDee Lamb there? And so I think that that's where he's progressing to, and I think that's pretty darn good, actually.
Now, to your point, and I have to admit, I was amazed by this, but since you brought up Dez Bryant, is in the Cowboys PR notes, the fastest Cowboys players ever to 200 receptions. 4th, Jason Witten, 51 games. Next, Herschel Walker, 48 games, and we'll just leave it at that. Second, I just dread his name coming up now. Second, Dez Bryant, 43 games. First, CeeDee Lamb, 41 games. So
yeah,
that's why I was asking about perception versus numbers, because I know the game continually evolves and you get more pass happy, but I don't feel like we're a whole generation removed from Dez where the game has changed that much that it would be that much easier. And CeeDee Lamb got to 200 catches faster than Dez Bryant.
I think they're so different as wide receivers.
They are.
Yes, they wear the same number, but
extremely uniquely different.
But then a little bit similar in yesterday, you're like, did you just screw up 2 plays that cost us points and then turnovers for, it ended up 14 points the other way too. And then you're like, but what about the other plays where he has the 50-yard touchdown pass approximately? I don't know exactly how far it was, but you have 11 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's huge. Like that without him, how are we moving the ball yesterday? Obviously, Tony Pollard had a good game, but then who do you throw to otherwise if he's not out there? And I felt like, boy, that was very Dez-like. I just felt like over Dez's career, we had a lot of these conversations if the Cowboys lost. Like, yeah, Dez had 2 touchdown catches and 7 catches for 105 yards. But what about the 2 interceptions that Tony Romo threw? Well, that was Tony Romo's fault. No, people are coming out and saying it was Dez Bryant's fault. He didn't run the route that he was supposed to run, and he is supposed to be here. And instead of cutting it at 12 yards or 10 yards, he started his cut at 15 yards, and that causes all kinds of problems. So it's like, to me, I felt like yesterday was a little bit of a Dez Bryant conversation that we were going to have today.
Kevin, you said he's on schedule to have 1,300 yards.
Yep.
If Justin Jefferson only averaged 37.5 yards a game for the rest of the season, he would still have more than 1,300 yards. Justin Jefferson's slated to get 1,996 yards at this
Which
point.
wouldn't even be first. Isn't that still behind Tyreek Hill? That's crazy. So that's why somebody texted in there like, hey, I know he's not having the best statistical season, but he also worked with a backup quarterback for several of these games. And that's the thing. But he is still on pace to have a good statistical season. 100 yards, 1,333 catches, and 9 touchdowns. Like, I know he's not Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson. I just feel like there's another space where he could still be a number 1 and not be those 2 guys.
I'm with you. I like what I've seen. I do want to have him here long term.
He's 23 also.
I get that. You talking about Jefferson or
Lamb?
Lamb. I get that he's not perfect. He's not Cooper Kupp. He's not Tyreek Hill. He's not Jamar Chase. He's not obviously Justin Jefferson, right? I mean, there's 4 guys off the top of my head. He's not in the conversation of those guys. But I feel like he is in the conversation once you start getting past some of those guys. And so I like what I've seen. I think he's improved this year. He's progressed. obviously he's got to get better at cutting, the route where he's supposed to cut so that safeties or cornerbacks can't jump in there and intercept the ball. But hopefully there's still more progression with his career.
And I absolutely think there can be.
In the last 4 games, they gave up 26 to the Bird Turds. They gave up 6 against Detroit. Then they gave up 29 in victory against Chicago, and now 31 points yesterday at 877-881-1053. What's going on? This is not a good trend. This is not as fun as it was through the first 5 games where they were keeping everybody under 20 and you could only score 1 touchdown on them. 682 says definitely overrated. It's about the time of year when the Cowboys start spiraling and we talk about who has to lose/win to make a wild card spot. I don't think the playoffs are in jeopardy. I'm not jumping off the bus as far as thinking they have a shot. I just am worried that their flaws are getting more and more exposed, and most teams are. I think if this was like a lot of years where you have these unbeatable teams atop the conference, then I would say, yeah, I don't think the Cowboys have a great shot to beat one of those juggernauts. But because the conferences in the league is still down as far as being the top side, I'm still having faith that this is going to be a team that could be competitive in the playoffs. They're just having a real tough time slowing down the run here. So, gentlemen, you have the floor. The question is out there: is this defense overrated?
I think it's for sure overrated when the talk has been best in the league or can carry a team to a title. I think that is starting to not be very accurate, but I do still think it's a very good defense, and there are some issues now where teams are running on you, and now they're so concerned with the run that they're overcompensating for it. And then there's Christian Watson beating you over the top time and time again. There's Allen Lazard in overtime. And so they're so concerned about the run game, and it's not working either. It's not like, hey, we're overloading and, well, at least when we go 8 in the box and play single high, we suffocate the run. And it's still not a good idea if you're leaving yourself vulnerable for Christian Watson to go 50 yards on you. But at least you could say, well, when we just really commit to it, we stop the run. You're trying to commit to it right now, and you're still not good at it. And it's all over the place. It's poor tackling. It's guys not being instinctual. It's the D lineman getting pushed around. It's your corners having no feel for, it's a run and I need to come screaming up to Phil on the edge. They're very, very late reacting. So it's across the board. The run defense is not very good. And now you're overcompensating to fix it. It's not working. You're not stopping the run when you do it. And now you're leaving yourself vulnerable for the big explosive plays. That was one of the things that killed them last year. For as good a defense as they were, they gave up so many explosive plays. And they've been really good about not giving that up this year. And they're not blitzing as much, so that's helping. But it's the same effect. Like,
you think they need to double down on it? Just protect the pass and let them run.
Yes.
We'll get to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel about it. I don't think them running on you as much as they did through 3 quarters of that game, it was really all that crippling. When it became crippling is when you sell out to stop it, and now they're having 3-play scoring drives because they're throwing it over top you. To me, that was the huge thing. And then in the fourth quarter, you give up a couple of big runs, and those are backbreakers. But 5 to 8 yard runs, you've seen it. You watch the Bears do it. They just did it to you last night, and they score all their points in the fourth quarter when they're mostly throwing it.
And I don't think they're going to massively change who they are, because as Mike said in the press conference about 30 minutes ago, they've been talking about this since training camp, Zach.
Yeah, I do think that this defense right now, I'd say they are overrated. And a big reason why they weren't giving up deep plays was Malik Hooker was playing well. He had a bad game yesterday. A guy last year that was a sure tackler for them and was critical in their success, Jaron Kearse. He hadn't been an impact player for him recently. And he got banged up and he was hurt, and maybe that's still an issue and why he's not playing up to standard. But that's a guy you expect a lot from, and he's not really giving you a high level of play right now either. You're taking poor angles. You're getting out of position. Maybe some guys are trying to play some hero ball. Blame can go all the way around on that defense.
469 says this team's a fraudulent. I don't know if they're that. Maybe they aren't as good as what we thought, though, Brian. How would you answer that question? Are they overrated?
Well, I think defensively, Dan Quinn's done a great job of masking a lot of the issues that they have. And I think there were some things going in there. We've all been enamored through the year this year with what Micah Parsons has been able to do. and how he's been able, and Dan's been able to move him around and get get some outstanding play from him. But I think they do have some issues on the edges when it comes to the run game. They absolutely have some issues when they don't play the scheme that Dan's asking them to play. I think Dan's doing the best he can to try and figure out whether it's move his front, twist his front, whatever he has to do to kind of figure some things out. But they're running out of some options to how to defend the run. And what happens to them though, they're kind of picking on you a little bit in the secondary. Mm-hmm. They're picking on Anthony Brown a little bit. They're picking on your nickel.
Kelvin Joseph a lot yesterday.
Yeah, and Kelvin I think will be fine. I think Bland was not as good as we've seen Bland play in the past. I think the game was a little big for him yesterday.
Inexperience got you in that fourth quarter.
I think so. Him, Joseph, there's been some inexperiences. They only played Clark for 7 snaps in that game yesterday. And that was a game where it turned into, you need some physical players playing the point of attack against the run. I think Dan's done a good job of masking some of the problems that you've had, and people are starting to catch up with
Issue is, you look at everybody in the playoffs that you're going to play, they all run the football pretty damn well. The Eagles running the ball well. Mm-hmm. Giants are going to run the football. Seattle's going to run the football on you. San Francisco's going to run the football, playing against a good run team this week. Now, this is a big week for Dan Quinn. You're going up against, arguably outside of Miami, the most explosive offense in the league. You got Justin Jefferson, who's playing like the best receiver in football. You got TJ Hawkinson, who crushed you a couple weeks ago with the Lions. Adam Thielen had a big game. You got Dalvin Cook, who's really good. This is an elite type of offense, skill-wise, that you're playing against with the Vikings. So this is a prove-it type of week for Dan Quinn and this defense to bounce back.
At least the Tolos aren't in denial about how bad this run defense is anymore. After the Chicago game, I said, listen, this is a problem. This is going to be the reason you lose in the playoffs. And everybody jumped down my throat like, how dare you say that? It's just how they get it done. You can't hate on them for the style of their defense. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to send a message to the Jones family. You guys are enabling the Joneses whenever you do that. Whenever you jump down my throat, I'm trying to tell them, build a team that has a advantage against everybody you'll face in the playoffs, not a team hoping to figure out a way to get it done in the fourth quarter. And they don't want to do it 2 years in a row now. They're like, oh, no, we're good. We're going to make the playoffs. They're just building teams to make the playoffs to get us excited, okay? So when we have a playoff team with a major flaw before the trade deadline and like, hello, we got to fix this, the Joneses gauge how the public reacts, okay? They know the vibe had gotten to the point that the fans are convinced you guys aren't going to do anything, right? We have to use that as a weapon. We have to use your disinterest as a weapon against them. You have to say cynical and skeptical, and don't shoot the messenger, because at the same time, we're being objective. Don't be a soccer mom about the way that you're rooting for your professional sports team, because the owners are paying attention. And if you will take anything and everything as far as BS they can dish out and still cape for them, still make excuses for them, they do notice that.